So, the great topic of spanking. I believe that is actually a good idea. I think that enforcing some kind of punishment on a child when they make a mistake or do something that needs to be corrected, I think that it is good to, kind of give them a stern hand and let them know, like, I'm in charge, I'm the parent, you will obey to my rules. So, where do you stand on that?
I don't really think it's necessarily right to hit your kid in any way. Any type of hurt that you're inflicting upon your child could probably reverse and not instill respect, but instill fear in your children. So I don't. It shouldn't be to the point where a child does something wrong and fears that they're going to get hurt when they get home.
Okay, so you're thinking that a child would kind of fear their parent. I do see where you're coming from, but I think that a child wouldn't necessarily fear the parent if they were talked to first. Because I think in spanking your child, you should actually tell them why they're getting this punishment. Because if you just hit your child and that's it, then yes, I would be scared of my parent too. But if my parent kind of sat me down and talked to me first, it was like, look, Denise, you did X, Y, and Z, and this is why you are receiving this punishment. I feel like that for me would kind of show me, like, okay, I know what I did wrong. I know why I'm getting this punishment, and I now will understand better where my parent is coming from. So I feel like if a parent, kind of does give a sit down, a calm down conversation, I think that will work. Do you think that, like, maybe if a parent did do like a calm down situation conversation, do you think that would help?
Absolutely not, because I feel like the conversation could still take place without inflicting physical pain upon your child. I feel like you could explain what they've done wrong and just as easily take away a privilege, take away dessert for a week. Anything like that will teach them their lesson because any child is going to be distraught about, of course, not having sprinkles on their Sunday, not being able to play their favorite game, or not being able to participate in their favorite activity. So I feel like that would be just as emotionally painful as spanking a child. So you wouldn't have to inflict physical pain. You can just teach them that way too. You can also talk to them and take away privileges in that sense.
Okay, with that in mind, I do see where you're coming from. I do think that it would be kind of helpful maybe to try to take away toys or privilege for the day. But what if you have a child that is one of those habitual offenders? A child that you take away the Xbox, you take away the video game privileges for the computer, you take away TV privileges, you take away sports, take away everything basically that this child holds to a high caliber. And now you still have a child that is disruptive. You would Where would you go from there as punishment if you decide that you don't want to whoop your child or put your hands on your child?
Part of being a parent is figuring out what to do. It's hard when you feel like you come to a dead end and you don't know what else to do. But I don't feel like the final result should be spanking, because then it would only be frustration, like, oh, nothing's working. What do I do to let out my aggression? So I don't feel like that would be personally geared towards a child. It would be so much frustration and anger and things that you're going through, and you take that out on the child. So I don't feel like it's necessary to take that to a last resort. It shouldn't be an option at all for you to physically put your hands on your child. There's other options. There's places you can go. They have counseling. You can even talk to, simple as calling your mother and asking her what to do.
So what if you come from a family that believes that spanking is the way? You've called your mother, you've called your father, you've called multiple family members, and they all counsel you in the same direction of, well, Denise, your child is acting out. It's now time for you to show them that you're the boss. Not necessarily saying that I'm going to get out a belt and straight just beat my child if there's no tomorrow, but maybe a couple taps on the palm of the hand. That's what my father did with his daughters to show us, what you're doing is wrong. Just in the palm of my hand. It wasn't invasive. It wasn't me pulling down my pants. It wasn't me feeling embarrassed. It was my hand hurts now. And I'm realizing every time you're smacking me in my hand, I want to pull it away, but you're holding it out so that I know physically in my hand and in my palm what I'm doing wrong. What do you think of if it was something not beating style, I guess I would say?
I mean, I would guess my question would be, where do you draw the line between spanking and beating your child? There are offenders that are incarcerated every day for things of this nature. You're leaving physical damage on your child's body. You're hurting them emotionally. You're almost breaking down their character by inflicting pain on them for something that they've done, and there's so many other options to resort to than that. Where do you draw the line between beating and spanking? What's really the difference? Because both of them, you're hurting your child. And wouldn't you ever think, if maybe an authority figure saw this, if maybe somebody saw this and reported this to the police, I could possibly be in trouble and go to jail for a very long time. So if it's something you can't do in front of authorities, then how can it possibly be right?
That is a very, very good point. Very good point. Hit home. I believe that with that being said, that actually kind of throws me off a little. But I do still think that a pop on the hand, a pop on the behind, this is my child. You don't know what I deal with behind closed doors. You can't see everything that I have to deal with, everything that I have to go through. So if I decide to pop my child on their butt because they're acting out, they're throwing themselves all over the place, they've stolen, they've done something, I do think that trying to talk them down would be my first resort. But if me talking to you is not working, maybe a little tap or a little something to get you to refocus. Maybe that's the problem with the child in the first place. They're just not focused. They're doing whatever they want to do and not taking into account of what's going on right now. So saying, kind of thinking what I want to do, some of these actions in front of others, depending on my mood of that time, I probably wouldn't even take into account others being around me because this is me and my child. This is how I handle my problems. And if someone was to see it and say it was an issue or tell me, oh, you shouldn't do that to your child or that's not right, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, you don't know what I deal with at home. So I guess for me, and me not being a parent, that's another point. So another point, and I guess kind of taking into this consideration, I myself, when I do have children, I just think that spanking for me would be a way and a route because that's what was given for me, and it helped me. Not all of my spankings were up to par, or I guess kind of showed or demonstrated the best way to try to get the point across with my parent, but it did in a way kind of show me sometimes like, okay, I messed up big time and I gotta spank it for it and my feelings were really hurt. So now I'm not gonna do that. That was my taking and walking away from some situations. Now others, I did try it again. I did go back and do it again. And now I'm thinking, children, they do sometimes see stuff and know, okay, I know this is wrong, but I'm still gonna do it again. So then that does kind of make me wonder when it comes to punishment, how far would a parent be able to go and how far would they not be willing to go? Because like you said, there is a fine line between beating and spanking. And I feel like as a parent, you should be able to know when I'm really hurting my child. Like this is getting to a point and going to a point where this is not fair to my child. My child is bleeding, my child is broken down. Like if it gets to that point, then yes, I do think authorities need to step in. Yes, I do think that your form of punishment is now ridiculous. But I feel that if you as a parent are able to tell yourself, okay, only a pop, only a tap, only one little piece of something to get attention, refocus, and then maybe a corner. I think those two combined together do help and have positive results for children.
Now, as you asked me before, what if that's not working? What if you've been spanking your child for a consequence for the things that they're doing and they're not responding to that? What if you've already done a pop on the hand? What if you've already given them a little tap? What if they're not responding to that and they continually do this behavior? How could you not be against it if it's not working? Then you're hitting your child for meaningless reasons over and over and nothing is happening there. I feel like that's a parenting flaw. That's when it becomes abuse. You're continually hurting and hitting your child and nothing's happening behaviorally. Don't you think that could make the child act out more for the emotional abuse that the child is receiving?
I feel like depending on the child, they're going to know how far they can push their parent. And as a child, they do know how far they can push their parent. They've lived with them, they've developed and taken on characteristics of their parents. So they know how far to push and how far to go. I do think that parents could come up to that roadblock of I'm constantly beating my child every day and now they're not acting right. Then it's abuse. It is no longer just a form of punishment. It is no longer just a way to control your child's behavior. And I do think that then it's a problem. And then that's when you need to step back as a parent and refocus and refigure, how do I get points across to my child? Because when it becomes to the point where you are habitually hitting your child and it's just ridiculous, it's like, where are you going with your punishment style? I do think that spanking is a good idea if you know where your limits are. Because if you don't know how to control your limits and your frustration levels with your child, then it's just very pointless and it's not fair to the child. Like you said, it can emotionally damage and scar a child if you don't know where to stop.
Now, what if by the child receiving spankings at home, um, repeats the behavior at school on other children and then tells an authority figure or your teacher, the reason why I'm behaving this way to other children is because I received this at home? How would you defend that? How would you justify your actions? If he's horribly beating children at school or even hitting children at school, and he says, I was simply trying to teach them a lesson. I explained to them why they were receiving what I was giving to them. So, I mean, I'm not really quite understanding how you could justify that then.
Um, that is a very good point. I do think that a child may carry their actions on to school. That's probably how some forms of bullying begins because, children aren't receiving the love and respect and kindness that they need at home. And I think that's when it's important for a a two parent council to be enforced. You always need that one parent that is that one that the child can talk to, that rock, that person that's solid, and the person that hands out the punishment. They too need to be a rock and a person that loves and cares for their child. But when you have two parents that are just both punishers, that child probably will end up displaying what they're getting and receiving at home. And I think in a parent's defense in that manner, there might not be one. Because in all actuality, if my child was to go to school and beat other kids because you get beatings at home, it's almost like, okay, now you're reflecting what I'm doing. And it's like it now will come to face for the parent and kind of make them sit back and wonder, why am I still taking this route with this child if it's not having any effect on them at all? And I think that that's when the parent would probably need to just talk to the teachers and talk to the counselors and talk to the police officers and maybe get their input on how to help raise this child and how to effectively go about dealing with the actions that I have to punish him or her for.
Now, you say if the spankings are seeming to be emotionally damaging to the child or they repeat the behavior at school, you should then take the next step to seek help. But I feel like it is almost a lost cause for you to begin with the spanking and then take consideration on what effects that it's having on the child.
This is very true. I do think that when a punishment is being dealt out, it would be smarter to take the appropriate routes to maybe prevent having to punish that child in that manner. But when you have a parent that all they knew for punishing was to spank, how do you correct that parent's knowledge and that parent's thought process in the beginning? Because that's all they knew. When they grew up, they just knew, if I did something wrong, I'm getting a spanking. So now when they have kids, each generation is now doing the same thing because that's all they know. And I think that's when it's kind of like harder to kind of say fine line between beating and spanking, because now it's like I've been brainwashed. Ever since I was a child, I've known spanking, spanking, spanking. And at some points it probably was beating because that's also what some people know. And so I feel like generationally, if no one's ever corrected it, then spankings and beatings would be the route that parents would take.
Now, just because a parent did this, if they were abused or whatever by the parent, there's no way that I would want to continue this cycle of danger, this cycle of enragement on my children. There's no way I would want to keep that going. You're saying that it's been done for generations and generations, and that's how they were brought up. Um,
Oh my God.